Hey guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. I'm just gonna open with the facts. I haven't washed my hair in like 4 days, and I really need to. I don't really remember how to put on makeup. I feel like when we start seeing people again, I'm going to have to watch a bunch of YouTube tutorials to be like, I don't remember how to do this. I don't want to use any of my brushes because I don't want to get them dirty because then I'll have to clean them. So it's all just like a mess. Everything's going well. I'm about to start kind of a really difficult revision process. Probably if you watch this a lot, you've noticed that every time I approach a revision, it's like different. Like I always talk about it like, okay, I've solved revision. I know how I'm going to do it. And then I do something different every time. So someone should really just like remind me that every time that I have to revise a first draft, it's going to be a completely different process. And yes, I can take everything I've learned, but it's not the same thing. So what I've done with this one, because it definitely has continuity problems and it's too long, I have outlined it. So I finished the draft, no idea what I wrote, truly no idea. I don't know if that's because it's like the book's not good, or like pregnancy has made me dumb, or like quarantine, I'm just losing my mind, but I can't remember what happened in the book, so I outlined what I could remember so that now I can make sure that everything I did write fits within the appropriate beats of essentially a 3-act structure. So that's how we're gonna do it. This month's spell read is The Suffragette Scandal by Courtney Milan. I know people have been really into Bridgerton, or, Bridgerton has kind of inspired a lot of people to start reading historical romance. I am not going to pretend I'm the be-all end-all expert on historical romance, but I would maybe discourage you from, if you watch Bridgerton and you enjoy it, I would not point you to the Bridgerton books. I think that the show went a long way towards repairing a lot of what's wrong with some of Julia Quinn's work. The sort of alternate history, fantasy, storytelling, like storybook quality of the show doesn't really repair the fact that Julia Quinn herself does not has a very whitewashed view of history, which is not to say that this book by Courtney Milan necessarily features, it doesn't feature characters of color, although Courtney Milan herself is Chinese American. But this book in particular is very good. She's an author I want to support. There's a really great sort of spell-centric concept to it. Comments on feminism and why do we move forward with trying to be feminists when it feels like, and especially intersectional feminists when it feels like we're not accomplishing anything. What do we expect to really change? And she presents a really good argument for that, that is optimistic, and but in a realistic way. So yeah, I hope you enjoy that. The rest of today is going to be kind of heavy. We're talking about a lot of mental health things. My dog just got startled, and so did I. As you can see, there's furniture in here now. There's also a rug. This piece of furniture is a changing table. Let's move on. This one is really hard. We're talking about grief, which has kind of been a subject for the year, different kinds of grief, the way we mourn people, versions of ourselves. But hi, Olivie. My mom died of COVID last December, and I want to know if you happen to have some advice on how to deal with grief. I've been having a really tough time, and I also have depression and anxiety, though I don't have the need to hurt myself because I genuinely think that if I let myself feel everything, I'm going to die of pain. So I've been trying to push thoughts out of my head so I don't have to deal with the fact that my mom is dead. I'm the oldest of 2 daughters, and my parents were divorced, so even though I have a little bit of support from my dad, it really is just my sister and me. So, do I have experience with grief? Yes. Someone I really love in Mr. Blake's family recently died from a second round of cancer, and it was hard and it was slow, and I lost my grandmother a couple of years ago. I wouldn't say that no one could possibly relate to your grief except for someone else. Not only someone who has lost their mother, but someone who has lost someone to COVID, because I think it's specifically a mix of grief, sadness, but also anger. There's a lot of injustice about the way that many countries are dealing with COVID. I don't necessarily know where you are, but I think there's a good chance you're located somewhere where they haven't handled it well. So I think it is kind of this mix of so many kinds of emotions. I'm not going to pretend like I know what that feels like. I'm not going to pretend I have any experience with that. But there are a few things I wanted to say that I hope are helpful. First, I wanted to read you this passage from Story of the Lost Child, which is book 4 in the Neapolitan novels, which I just recently finished rereading. If you're looking for a way to distract yourself, this might be great. But there's this passage. I struggled to accept my mother's death. Even though I didn't shed a tear, the pain lasted for a long time and perhaps has never really gone away. I had considered her an insensitive and vulgar woman. I had feared her and fled. Right after her funeral, I felt the way you feel when it suddenly starts raining hard and you look around and find no place to take shelter. For weeks, I saw and heard her everywhere, night and day. She was a vapor that in my imagination continued to burn without a wick. I missed the different way of being together we had discovered during her illness. I prolonged it by retrieving memories of when I was a child and she was young. My sense of guilt wanted to compel her to endure. In a drawer, I put a hairpin of hers, a handkerchief, a pair of scissors, but they all seemed inadequate objects. Even her bracelet was worthless. The words she had said to me at the end, "You're you, I have confidence," also stayed with me for a long time. She died convinced that because of how I was made, because of the resources I had accumulated, I would not be overwhelmed by anything. That idea worked inside me and in the end helped me. I decided to prove to her that she had been right. I began again in a disciplined way to take care of myself. I returned to using every bit of empty time for reading and writing. And she goes on to talk about what she did that, covers several months after. And that may not be where you are in the grieving process. But I thought that way of looking at it is very interesting. There's a lot of cliches about, when you look at death and people say like, well, they wouldn't want you to be unhappy. Your mother wouldn't want you to be sad forever. But that doesn't mean that it's that easy to move on. And this pain is still very fresh. This really happened not very long ago. And I think there is a possibility that you might be putting pressure on yourself to feel better by a certain time, or like assign yourself arbitrary deadlines that are really not going to work, because I don't think that recovery is a straightforward process. I think that recovery is something you address every day, and that feeling better isn't a matter of waking up one day and feeling like you've come to terms with everything and that you've accepted it. I think that it's the same way. I think if I could choose a way for us, all of us, to view happiness, it would not be as... Happiness is not like the end goal. Happiness is not like a metric that we're moving towards. Happiness is something that I think we have to find every day. And I think that in your case, we can, swap out the word happiness for relief or joy. Joy is like a sharper, perhaps more temporary version of the ever elusive happiness or meaning. I think instead you want to find something in each day that makes you feel like you are connecting with the world, that you are, ultimately we are social beings, even those of us who are introverted or those of us who don't want to reach out to others. There's still a part of us that wants to feel like there's a community for us. And even if right now that feels like it's only you and your sister, it could be bigger than that, and it doesn't have to mean talking about your grief, but finding a shared moment in each day, maybe. I know that feels very elusive, especially in these times, but I think that it is important to do as much for yourself that makes you feel like you exist, like you're here for a reason, like there's something for you to look forward to. You need to try to find moments of that as often as you can. I just think that it is very important to allow yourself to feel things as you feel them. I understand what you mean about not wanting to feel everything. I don't think maybe you need to open up some sort of Pandora's box of emotions, but I think when you feel sad, you let yourself feel sad. And when you feel happy about something or relief about something, or when, you do something that you enjoy, you allow yourself to enjoy it. I think what you want to try to take off the table is guilt, any sort of survivor's guilt where you're like, I shouldn't be enjoying myself because my mother is gone. The absence of her in your life should not rob you of your life. I mean, I'm not going to stand on a soapbox and tell you that I understand motherhood just because there's like something growing in me. But in terms of what I would want for my child, if I were gone, I can't imagine that any part of me would want them to be sad forever. I would want them to be able to deal with that sadness. I think that one of the hardest things about sadness is when we try to deny ourselves feeling when we try to sort of like lean on harder emotions like anger, for example, or focusing like on the injustice of things that can give us some sort of like adrenaline surge that feels like emotion, but it's not satisfying in the way that it is to just feel sad with the memories that you have and the concept that she's gone. I think that one sure way to never gain acceptance is to never allow yourself to feel whatever it is that you need to feel. And I understand that that's much harder with depression and anxiety because you can't always, it sometimes feels like it doesn't have an end. I think that is the hardest part. Certainly for me, the hardest part about depression is never knowing for sure that it will end. And I can see why that's scary and why you wouldn't really want to give in to sort of the beginning feelings of sadness and pain and loneliness. Loneliness is really hard. But I think that you have to allow it. Because it's not something you can push away. It will only fester. It will only lead you to like anger and denial, and all of that is like kind of a terrible place to be because nothing is satisfying and you can't connect to other people while you're like that. You're just kind of like stagnant. So you miss out on the relationship that you could be having with your sister, with someone else, allowing other people to support you. I don't know. I don't want to give you a long list of things not to do. I think I just want to tell you that recovery, acceptance, it's not going to be something that you like chase and then gain when everything is exactly right, and like that you've crossed this bridge and you've accepted it. And I don't think it's going to feel like that. It's not going to feel like crossing a finish line. And instead you have to reimagine the feeling of you have successfully dealt with this, or that you are addressing your feelings, is to accept that there's something every day that you can look forward to, something that keeps you feeling like there is something a little bit new or enjoyable about every day to kind of get you through the process of feeling like nothing is really changing and that you're trapped. I think that's like where you'd really struggle, and like a quicksand of grief, that's where you don't want to be. And I think it can be really small things. I think it can be watching a movie that you like, doing a hobby that you enjoy. Sometimes work can be helpful, not just to distract yourself, but also to feel like, to do something that makes you feel productive. Like the number one on the list of depression symptoms is the loss of interest in things that you used to enjoy. But I think that you can take that back to some extent. It's often that the idea of doing something you used to enjoy is super overwhelming. And so I think you can give yourself smaller versions of that. Or even if it's super tiny things like feeling good about the fact that you took a shower. I need to take a shower, so I'm going to feel great about the fact that I washed my hair. It depends what you enjoyed before this, the ways that you found happiness before this, what the things that you care about. I think creation can be very cathartic. Any form of creativity, nurturing something might help. Even if it's like a plant, a project that you've been meaning to take on that you haven't, something that is going to allow you to feel like you are still here, but you're really still here and still actively part of the world in some way. And I know that it can be extra hard because you feel responsible for your sister's emotions and her well-being. And sometimes it can be really easy to take on other people's mental health as like our project. That's like, well, I have to make sure that she's okay before I can address myself. But, that's not how it works. The whole secure your oxygen mask before helping others is actually a very important thing. As much as you want to be there for another person, you can't really be there for them in a way that they really need you unless you are also taking care of yourself. So I think you need to take those moments to decide where you are, to kind of locate yourself emotionally in existence, in the universe, figure out where you are in your process of dealing with your mother's loss. And then from there, how can you ensure that this life that she gave you, this very precious thing that she gave you, is not going to waste? And that doesn't necessarily mean, I don't think that means like doing things to honor her. I think that you taking care of yourself is honoring her. Having a relationship with your sister, and continuing to move forward in the world and living your life is honoring her life. So yeah, I hope that helps you. Even though I know there's nothing anyone can say that's going to make it better. Nothing's going to make it better. Don't expect to hear the right thing and it's like opening a door, like unlocking something, and then everything's good. Just find the moments. Allow yourself to take those moments when they come, and don't feel guilty for them. These next two questions are sort of similar. I think they're going to blur together. One is, Olivie, do you have advice on how to help yourself heal and grow when you're around hurt people? When you're not around healing energy and are trying hard to deflect and protect yourself and grow? And someone asked me what I consider a similar question, which is, my best friend is currently suffering from depression, or maybe starting to suffer. So I wanted your advice on how to treat her, knowing that I am also depressed. So to me, this is the same idea. This is the same concept as we were talking before with the secure your own oxygen mask before helping others. Because the one thing you'll never be able to sort of fake is your actual ability to help people if you haven't helped yourself. Your like energy tank is not going to allow you to do very much. I mean, it is essentially, you've got a gas tank of your own mental health, and if yours is depleted, you can't go anywhere. You literally cannot drive a car with an empty gas tank. So I do think that sometimes you have to draw the line between what you need to do for yourself and what other people need to take from you. And actually, a lot of this is going to come back to the way we were discussing grief, which is that happiness, mental health, all of that, this is not crossing a finish line. This is every day you achieve a little bit of mental health and you accept that. And there are backslides. There are days of depression. There are times when you're not okay. And those are the times that you need to take care of yourself. And then there are days when you feel good, and those are the days that you can help others. There will be situations, there will be people who in their own pain will lash out at you, and there is nothing that you can do about that. I think you have to be sort of realistic about what any person can do for another person. We all have to help ourselves before we can help others. That includes all the hurt people around you. That includes your friend with depression. Like, there is not a lot. There is a ceiling on what you can do for anyone, just like there's a ceiling on what anyone could do for you. Identify the people in your life who are going to be willing to accept that, you have your limits. And with the friend who has depression, I think that one of the things that I find really helpful about dealing with mental health, the baseline treatment for mental health is like rigorous routine. Go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time, eat as healthy as possible. It's just, your mental health is part of your whole body. So taking care of yourself by giving yourself routine is a good way to start. And part of that routine is that maybe you and your friend can have like a ritual. If it's like a weekly ritual where you guys do something, you watch a movie together, you guys start a like book club about books that make you feel better, you could maybe trade back and forth. The idea of a ritual, I think, is very helpful, because then you're not saying you can have all of my time. I think part of when it gets difficult is when people expect you to be available for whenever something is going on with them. I think it's better when you're like, on Thursday nights, I am 100% yours and you are mine, and we are going to do this thing, and it's just about us, and we do this together, and it makes us feel better. It's something that we look forward to. Maybe we cook dinner together, we bake together, or something like that. And creating this idea that like, I am here for you 100% at this time when I've mentally prepared myself to be there for you. Because being endlessly open to other people's needs is not a good way to take care of yourself. So in the event that you're around people who are hurting and need something and you want to be there for them, I think you just have to set boundaries. And I know that sounds a lot easier than it actually is. The setting of a boundary is a very difficult thing to put a finger on. But I think it's like, think of it as like, you're a university professor and you're setting office hours or something, that like there is a specific time when you are available to them and a specific amount of energy you're willing to give them. Being really clear about when you need time for yourself and not really making excuses either. When people say, are you available? You're not available. If you're trying to do something for yourself, if you just need that time for yourself, you are not available and you don't need to make excuses for that. It's just, I'm not available. This is when I will be. And then you can kind of mentally prepare for whenever that would be. But yeah, I think in general, it's weird how often I say like scheduling is like a solution to problems, but it really is. And if someone is taking too much from you, if someone is taking more than you are able to give, there's no real loss to telling them that. Because if it's someone who really cares about you, that you can really trust, they'll understand that. And if they don't, then then that's already someone who's going to make your life more difficult anyway. And, this always comes back to trying not to feel guilty about things that you have to do for yourself. You have to secure your own mask. You really do. You have to make sure that you are able to help others, to lead others, to deal with their problems, because that is additional weight that you take on. And if you are not healthy enough to handle those things, you will collapse. And that doesn't help anyone in the end. So, martyring yourself is not going to help anyone. Feeling like you want to feel needed, also not going to help, especially if you're going to lose your capacity to do so. So definitely do what you have to do for you to find that moment of happiness in every day. Find ways to achieve that before you can help other people, and try to be honest about what you need. No one is going to just predict that for you. No one is going to know that they're crossing a line usually. So if you have to tell them where your line is, then you have to tell them. And don't apologize for that. It is what it is. You would expect the same of them. If you were crossing a line for them, they should have the right to tell you that too. So yeah, just keep that in mind. And then someone also asked, so how to articulate your feelings. I've been dealing with some issues for a long time and no one seems to care. Like they take them as if they were nothing. And I take that on myself, that I didn't know how to communicate correctly until I don't recognize it anymore. I just stay shut up. And needed to talk with anybody so badly. So I tried therapy, but didn't work because it's not financially an option. Okay. And so I think this is a mix of how you articulate your feelings, but also what you expect from people when you articulate them. This is sort of like an inside-outside game where talking about your feelings might be something you have to do with yourself first. When you are having a feeling that something that feels like you can't crawl out from under, you might want to just sit there in that feeling and process what is going on, even if that means writing it down for yourself. I've been doing a lot of journaling advice, which is funny because I don't actually journal very much. But I think that when you're first trying to identify your feelings, it can sometimes be easier to admit it to yourself. But I think more important than articulating your feelings is managing your expectations from other people, because other people are not going to provide you what therapy is going to provide you. Other people have their own wants and needs. And you can ask for support, but you have to know what that support looks like. Do you just want someone to listen? Do you want advice? Do you want someone to be sympathetic, and how do you want them to show sympathy? This is very important, okay? Because it depends, this is going to determine who you go to, because you have to really understand who people are. Some people are not going to give you exactly what you want, because that's not how they express emotion. You have to choose, your context, your time and place, what's going on with them, who are they, how do they express emotions, how much familiarity do they have with what's going on with you, and you have to decide that based on what what you want from them. People listen in different ways. And there are people who their gut instinct is going to be, okay, you have a problem, let's fix it. And maybe that's not what you want. It's probably not what you want. I'm definitely one of those people where when people present me with a problem, I immediately begin trying to fix it. That's what I do. That's why I'm here doing this, is because when people say something is wrong, I'm like, okay, let me give you something that's like an itemized thing, an action, or something you could put on a checklist and check off, because that's how I deal with problems. I think that primarily, even more important than being able to explain back to yourself what you're feeling, is understanding what it is that you want. Because I think that once you start articulating your feelings to yourself, you might be able to identify ways that you can do something about it. And then you've already taken half the burden off of yourself, right? It's just because now that you understand what's making you feel sad, or what's making you feel angry, or making you feel hopeless, then you can address that in some way. It will be clearer to you because you have already made it clear to yourself. But if what you need is to feel connected to other people, or if what you need is for someone to acknowledge that you're suffering, then I think you might need to ask for that. I think you just really need to be upfront with, when you seek help and support from other people, that you are clear with them what you would like them to do. I think that it's fair to ask for very specifically what you want. Much more fair to do that than to expect them to do something. And not ever make it clear to them what that is. A lot of people are going to be overwhelmed by your emotions. And it's not necessarily a matter of not articulating it. It's because, what does anyone do? It's hard to know what to do when someone opens up to you with something intimate and you don't necessarily know what to give back. So I think that, if you can identify what it is you want from the person that you've chosen to confide in, that will be helpful both for you getting what you want out of it, and that person in determining how to help you. As far as articulating your own feelings, those are your feelings, man. I can't tell you how to feel them. And putting words to them is, how does that come to you? How does anything come to you? So you watch a movie and it resonates. I write down lines from books all the time. I listen to lyrics and I'm like, that means something to me. Why does it mean something to me? A lot of articulating your feelings is just spending time in them and figuring out why you feel them. And that is a skill. Not a lot of people know how to introspect. That's what therapy is, actually, is kind of connecting the dots of, I feel this way, what caused me to feel this way, and now how do I resolve it? Really, what a therapist does is teach you how to reframe your feelings, and instead of assuming that they come from nowhere, figuring out where it is they come from and how you can embrace that, heal them, how to embrace parts of yourself, or alternatively, how to accept that some parts of yourself are problematic and you have to deal with them. Become comfortable enough to sit with your emotions and really process them. And while you're processing them, figure out what would heal them. You have to do a little bit of self-diagnosis. It's like, this is what's wrong with me. And the thing that would make me feel better is just for someone to acknowledge that this is happening. I just want someone to hear me, someone to say like, okay, I hear you, I understand. I've had to work through this as well, where sometimes I'm not necessarily sure what I want, what kind of reaction I want. Mr. Blake will always listen to me, but sometimes I want more than just listening. Sometimes I want a certain action and I have to think about what that action is. Sometimes I need him to understand something to a very specific extent. That's like, sometimes I need the space to be so vulnerable that I can cry and he can literally see how much it hurts. Asking for someone's comprehension is hard. You never really know what that's going to look like. And you kind of have to, I guess, be able to envision in advance what your ideal situation looks like, what it feels like, what kind of time you want from them, what kind of space. I know that these are really abstract things, but being able to picture that will allow you to figure out, where and when you want to have this conversation, if at all, and with whom, which will help you a lot in terms of articulating things that are already really hard to articulate. So anyway, we are totally out of time. I've taken a lot of it. This has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing, and I'll see you next week.